Welcome back, deep divers. Today, we're going deep into a rivalry that's been bubbling for over a century.
Coke versus Pepsi.
That's right, Coke versus Pepsi, beyond just a taste test.
Way beyond. This is about marketing battles, global domination.
Oh, and some serious fizzascos along the way.
Right. Like, who knew that Coke was originally dreamed up as a health drink?
Well, I mean, kind of makes sense. Back then, pharmacies were like the original soda fountains, right?
Exactly. And that's where it all started. In 1886, John Pemberton, a pharmacist, creates Coca-Cola.
And was he trying to cash in on that whole temperance movement thing going on?
Totally. He's like, hey, here's this healthy, non-alcoholic alternative.
But hold on, didn't Coke used to have, like, actual cocaine in it?
Okay, well, here's where things get interesting. The original recipe did use coca leaves.
So there was cocaine in there.
Yeah, each glass is estimated to have had about 9 milligrams of cocaine.
9 milligrams. Whoa, that's a bit more than a pep in your step, Brad.
Yeah, a little pick-me-up. It wasn't until the early 1900s they took out the fresh coca leaves and started using a decoconized extract.
Oh, okay. So no more cocaine kick.
Yeah.
But you know what I've always wondered? That iconic Coke bottle shape? Is it true they based it on a woman's figure?
That is a very common myth, actually.
Really?
Yeah, the designer, Earl R. Dean, he actually got his inspiration from the Cocoa Pod.
A Cocoa Pod? Seriously?
Yeah, though, I mean, I guess some people still see a resemblance to a Victorian-era dress in those curves.
Yeah, okay, I kind of see it. But you know, those first Coke bottles were totally different.
Right, the very early bottles were straight-sided, those Hutchinson bottles. It wasn't until 1915 that Dean's contoured bottle won a competition.
And that became the one we all recognize today. So we got these two drinks, both starting in pharmacies.
Both kind of health tonics, really.
But how do they go from drugstore curiosities to these global giants?
Bottling. Bottling was crucial, and Coca-Cola, well, they made a move that some consider a huge blunder.
What do they do?
They sold the bottling rights for just $1.
$1. Seriously.
$1, no set time limit, no price controls.
Wow. That had to come back to bite them.
Oh, it did. It locked them into that fixed 5-cent price for decades.
Ouch, even with inflation.
Exactly. Meanwhile, Pepsi sees this as an opportunity, especially during the Great Depression.
Smart move.
They started offering twice the amount of soda for the same nickel.
Twice the fizz for your nickel. I like it.
Right. People loved it. This clever marketing, plus their focus on volume distribution, all fueled their rise.
Okay, but it wasn't just business savvy. What about the taste? I mean, there were those blind taste tests, right?
Ah, yes. The infamous Pepsi challenge. People consistently chose Pepsi over Coke.
That must have shaken Coke to its core.
It did. They kind of panicked, actually.
What did they do?
They reformulated the drink. 1985, they introduced New Coke.
Oh, yeah, New Coke.
Yeah, it was supposed to be their comeback, but consumers were not having it.
They hated it.
Hated it. Huge backlash.
Talk about a marketing misfire. It's like they forgot that Coke is more than just a drink.
It really is. It's tied to emotions, memories.
Totally. And speaking of emotions and memories, let's talk about the marketing magic behind these brands. That's after the break.
We'll be right back with more Coke versus Pepsi. Welcome back, Deep Divers.
All right, so before the break, we were talking about how Coke really messed up with that whole New Coke thing.
Oh, yeah, they really underestimated the power of nostalgia, that brand loyalty.
Totally. It's like they forgot that for a lot of people, Coke is more than just a drink. It's like tied to memories, emotions.
Absolutely, and that's where the marketing magic comes in, right?
For sure. When you think about Coke and Pepsi, you can't help but think about those jingles, those slogans.
Those iconic images.
Exactly. Like just hear a share of Coke and boom, you see that red and white logo.
It's brilliant marketing. But did Coke always have that, that classic all-American image?
That's what I always thought, like wholesome, family-friendly.
Well, it's interesting because their early advertising actually focused on beautiful women, like often in high fashion.
Really?
Yeah.
So it was more sophisticated, aspirational.
Exactly. Very different from what came later.
Huh, that's surprising. So when did Santa enter the picture? I always thought that was like a Coke invention.
Ah, yes, the jolly red-suited Santa we all know and love. Coke definitely played a huge role in popularizing that image, especially through those Haddon Sunblum illustrations.
From the 1930s, right?
Yep, those became iconic. But, believe it or not, they weren't the first to use Santa in advertising.
No way. Who else used Santa?
A company called White Rock Beverages. They used Santa to sell their ginger ale back in the 1920s.
Wow, I had no idea. So Coke just, like, perfected the image.
Exactly. They took that existing image and made it their own. And those holiday campaigns, year after year, they really cemented that association.
Makes sense. So did they always use Coke in their advertising?
For a long time, they actually insisted on Coca-Cola.
Hmm.
They were worried Coke would become generic, dilute the brand.
Right, like Kleenex or Band-Aid.
Exactly. But eventually they embraced the nickname, made it official in the 1940s, even trademarked it.
Smart move. So while Coke was building this wholesome image, what was Pepsi doing? Were they going after the same audience?
Not quite. They often took a different approach, focusing on niche markets. For example, in the 40s and 50s, they launched these groundbreaking campaigns aimed at African Americans.
Really? I've never heard about that.
Yeah, they featured prominent Black figures, really tailored the messaging. It was a bold move for the time.
It was, especially back then.
And it was incredibly successful, significantly increased their market share.
Interesting. So they were appealing to a demographic that Coke maybe wasn't reaching as effectively?
Exactly. Pepsi also really leaned into sports sponsorships, music tie-ins.
To project a younger, more rebellious image.
Exactly, that Pepsi generation vibe.
Smart. But their rivalry wasn't just in the US, was it? Didn't they take this battle global?
Oh, absolutely. Both brands wanted to dominate the world, basically. And there's actually a crazy story about Pepsi in the Soviet Union.
Wait, what? Pepsi in the Soviet Union? During the Cold War?
I know, right? Seems crazy. But in the 70s, Pepsi struck a deal with the Soviet government, a barter agreement.
What did they trade?
Pepsi for Stolichnaya vodka.
Wow. So Pepsi was the first American product officially sold in the USSR.
It was. They were literally breaking down the Iron Curtain with cola.
I wonder if they saw it as like a peace initiative or just a business opportunity.
Who knows? But it definitely shows the power of consumer goods to transcend political boundaries. Of course, once the Soviet Union collapsed, Coke jumped right
Of
in.
course, they
Yeah.
must have been seen as a symbol of like the West, capitalism.
Exactly. And they gained a lot of ground quickly in Russia. It became almost like a statement, which cola you chose.
Wow, it's amazing how intertwined these brands became with like global politics.
It really is. They became symbols representing ideas and values.
It's a lot more than just a drink, isn't it?
Way more. But, besides navigating global politics, one of these companies actually tried something pretty innovative with their packaging.
You're talking about Coke's push for sustainability, right?
Yeah, in 2021, they announced a plan to transition to fully recycled plastic bottles in the U.S.
I remember that. And they even experimented with those paper bottles for a while.
They did, although that seems to have had its own challenges.
Yeah, I can imagine. Keeping the fizz in a paper bottle can't be easy. But it's interesting to see them grappling with that environmental impact,
Absolutely. That focus on sustainability is only going to get bigger.
for sure. But beyond those sustainability efforts, have these brands faced any, like, controversies over the years?
Oh, yeah. Both Coke and Pepsi have had their share of PR nightmares. Coke faced boycotts in some Arab countries because of their investments in Israel.
Right, and then there were those allegations about them using Colombian death squads to silence union workers.
Yeah, although they denied any involvement.
It's tough to maintain that squeaky clean image on a global scale, I guess. What about Pepsi? Any skeletons in their closet?
Well, there was that whole Madonna advertising fiasco in the late 80s, remember?
Oh, yeah, they had to pull that multi-million-dollar campaign because of the controversy with her, like a prayer video.
Yep, that was a big one.
Yep.
And then there was the Pepsi number fever debacle in the Philippines.
What happened there?
They accidentally printed way too many winning bottle caps.
Oh, no.
Yeah, it led to riots, even deaths. A real tragedy.
Wow, it just goes to show how even something like a marketing promotion can have these unintended consequences.
It really does. But both Coke and Pepsi, they've shown a remarkable ability to bounce back.
They have. They're resilient.
Despite these setbacks, they're still global powerhouses, constantly evolving, adapting.
After delving into all this, their history, their marketing, the controversies, I have to admit, I'm feeling a newfound respect for both Coke and Pepsi.
Me too. It's been fascinating to uncover all this complexity behind these, seemingly simple drinks.
They've left their mark on history, culture, even politics in ways we never imagined.
Exactly. It makes you think about your own relationship with Coke or Pepsi. Is it just a drink? Or does it represent something more?
Right. Maybe it's tied to memories or it reflects your values, your identity even.
It's a personal choice, ultimately, but what we've learned is that there's so much more to it than just the taste.
It's almost like choosing a sports team or a political party, right? There's history, loyalty, values attached to these brands.
Absolutely. And let's not forget the influence of that masterful marketing. Those jingles, those commercials, the celebrity endorsements, it all shapes our perceptions, our choices.
So we're not just choosing a drink, we're buying into a lifestyle, a set of values.
Precisely. And that's what makes this rivalry so fascinating. It's a reflection of us, our tastes, our values, our place in the world.
One thing that really struck me was how both Coke and Pepsi navigated those social and political landscapes over the years.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Coke becoming a symbol of American imperialism, Pepsi making inroads in the Soviet Union, it's wild.
It's incredible how they've adapted to different cultures, ideologies.
It makes you think about the power of brands to transcend their products.
Right. To become something bigger, tap into our emotions, our identities, our desires.
Exactly. And that's what makes this deep dive so rewarding. We've gone beyond the surface, beyond the hype.
We've learned about their origins, their missteps, their brilliance, their global impact. And honestly, I'm suddenly really thirsty for a cold cola.
Me too. All this talk about Coke and Pepsi has definitely triggered a craving. But before we grab a can, let's leave our listeners with something to ponder.
Okay, I like this. What do you have in mind?
We talked about Coke and Pepsi's global dominance, but what about the future? What new challenges are they facing?
That's a great question,
Hmm.
especially with all the health concerns, the rise of alternative beverages.
Right, like those fancy sparkling waters, craft sodas. Will Coke and Pepsi's reign continue?
Or will they become like relics of the past?
Exactly. Will they adapt or will they fade away? I guess only time will tell.
Maybe we'll need to revisit this in a few years, see how the Cola Wars are playing out. But for now, we'll leave our listeners with that thought-provoking question. What do you think? Will Coke and Pepsi keep dominating? Or is this the beginning of the end?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. Will we still see those red and blue cans battling it out on the shelves in like 50 years?
It's hard to imagine a world without
Wow.
them, you know?
Yeah.
But then again, I mean, think about it. A few decades ago, who would have thought we'd all be obsessed with, like, craft beer?
Or kombucha. Right.
Exactly. Things change, tastes evolve.
Yeah.
These companies are going to have to keep up, you know?
And speaking of kombucha, it seems like there's this big shift towards healthier drinks these days, right?
Absolutely. People are more aware of what they're drinking, and all that sugar and soda, well, it's not exactly a health food.
It's a challenge for Coke and Pepsi for sure. I mean,
Right.
they've tried to diversify, right? Diet versions, bottled water, even juices. Yeah, but it's just not the same, is it? Those haven't really captured that same, like, cultural magic as the original colas.
It's tough. They're trying to be everything to everyone, but it's almost like they're diluting their own brand.
And then you have the whole sustainability thing. Those plastic bottles, they've become a symbol of waste.
And people are demanding change. I mean, remember those paper bottles Coke tried out?
Yeah, maybe that's the future. Although I'm sure there are, like, a ton of challenges with that, too.
Totally. But this whole sustainability thing, it's not going away.
Nope. Coke and Pepsi are going to have to get creative, find ways to lessen their impact.
So we've got these two giants facing some pretty big hurdles. Changing tastes, health concerns, sustainability. Think they can handle it.
I mean, they've been around for over a century, right? They've survived economic crises, marketing flops, global politics.
Yeah, that's true. They're survivors.
Yeah.
But this feels different, you know, more fundamental. It's not just about tweaking a recipe or a new ad.
Yeah, it's bigger than that. This is like a defining moment for them.
They need to figure out how to, like, stay true to their brand, but also appeal to these new consumers.
Exactly. People who care about health, the environment, social justice.
It's like they need to find their purpose all over again. What does Coke, what does Pepsi represent in a world that's, like, dealing with climate change and inequality?
That's the big question,
Yeah.
right? And it's not just them, it's every company, every institution, even us as individuals. What's our role in all this?
So where does that leave us? Is this the end of the Cola Wars? Or will they find a way to reinvent themselves?
I wish I had the answer. But honestly, that's what makes this so interesting, right? The future is uncertain, and it's up to us as consumers to decide what these brands mean to us.
Well said. I think we've given our listeners a lot to think about today. I'm guessing you'll never look at a can of Coke or Pepsi the same way again.
I hope not.
Hmm.
We uncovered some pretty cool stuff, and it just shows you even the most familiar things can have these hidden stories, these layers of complexity.
And that's what we love about the deep dive. Thanks for joining us on this fizzy adventure, everyone. Remember, stay curious, keep exploring, and always ask those tough questions.